Members of the US Congress writing to Andrew, formally requesting an interview with him in connection with his friendship with the paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein.
No response yet from Andrew Mountbatten Windsor in relation to this request from the House Oversight Committee, that is the congressional committee that has been investigating Jeffrey Epstein, the group, for example, that has been releasing some of the documents like the so-called birthday book that there has been so much focus on in recent months. But I can tell you that 16 members of the committee, all Democrats, have now written to the former Duke of York, and they say they believe he may have crucial information about co-conspirators and enablers of Jeffrey Epstein.
All right, so let me just say this right up front. What I'm about to tell you is absolutely insane. Like, I know we've covered some wild stuff on this channel, but this one is different. This is the kind of story that makes you wonder what's really going on behind closed doors in Washington. And honestly, it's the kind of thing that should make every single American, no matter what side you're on, sit up and pay attention. So here's what's happening. A whistleblower, an actual FBI whistleblower, just came forward to Congress with some seriously damning information about the Trump administration and the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. And when I say damning, I mean the kind of stuff that could blow the lid off one of the biggest political scandals we've seen in years. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're probably like, oh great, another Epstein story. Haven't we heard enough about this already? And look, I get it. We've been talking about Epstein for years. But this is different. This isn't some random conspiracy theory floating around on the internet. This is a protected whistleblower telling members of Congress that FBI personnel were given specific instructions to flag any documents in the Epstein files that mention Trump's name. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
A group of Democrats and the House Oversight Committee quietly sent a formal letter overseas, not to a witness or to a whistleblower, but to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the man the world once knew as Prince Andrew. Their request testify before Congress about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And behind that request lies something much bigger. A pressure campaign aimed squarely at Speaker Mike Johnson and indirectly at Donald Trump himself.
Think about that for a second. The FBI, supposedly the most independent law enforcement agency in the country, allegedly being told to single out documents about the sitting president. Can you believe this? Like, this is the stuff of political thrillers, except it's happening right now in real life. And the craziest part, Congress is absolutely losing it over this. We're talking Democrats demanding answers, Republicans trying to contain the damage, and the whole thing threatening to spiral completely out of control. Senator Dick Durbin's office confirmed to NBC News that this whistleblower exists and that these allegations are real. We're not talking about some anonymous source or leaked rumor. This is official. This is on the record. In the Justice Department, crickets. They haven't said a word publicly about any of this. Nothing. Which, come on, only makes the whole thing look more suspicious, right? But wait, it gets better. Because while this whistleblower drama is unfolding, the House Oversight Committee just voted, and this is wild. They voted 8-2 to demand the full release of all the DOJ's Epstein records. All of them. Everything. And guess what happened? The White House objected. Of course they did. And Republican leadership actually cut the session short to avoid more political fallout. They literally shut down the meeting because it was getting too hot to handle. So now we've got this situation where some Republicans are actually siding with Democrats on this transparency issue, and other Republicans are scrambling to make the whole thing go away before the 2026 midterms. The party is literally splitting over this. And in the middle of all this chaos, Trump himself is out there denying everything, claiming he never wrote some letter that supposedly shows up in Epstein's birthday album from way back in 2003. Yeah, you heard that right. A birthday album? Like, who even keeps birthday albums as an adult? But that's a whole nother conversation. Here's where it gets really interesting though. Trump actually told his Attorney General Pam Bondi to seek court approval to release grand jury testimony. On the surface, that sounds like he's trying to be transparent, right? Like he's saying, hey, I've got nothing to hide, let's release everything. But, and this is a big but, the key documents are still locked up behind court decisions. So we're in this weird limbo where Trump is saying he wants transparency, the White House is blocking investigations, And the whistleblower is telling Congress that the FBI was playing favorites with evidence. And all of this is happening while Trump's approval ratings are tanking, like absolutely cratering, which means this couldn't come at a worse time for the administration. We're heading into 2026, the midterms are coming up, and now the entire Republican Party has to deal with allegations of a Trump-Epstein cover-up. This is the nightmare scenario for anyone trying to hold on to power in Washington. The timing of all this is just perfect, isn't it? Like, you couldn't script this better if you tried. Trump is already dealing with historically low approval numbers. The economy is shaky at best, and now this bombshell drops. And it's not just dropping, it's exploding across every news network, every social media platform, every political conversation in the country. This is dominating the news cycle in a way that very few stories do. And you know what makes this even more explosive? The fact that we're not just talking about some abstract political scandal. We're talking about Jeffrey Epstein. We're talking about one of the most notorious criminals in modern American history. We're talking about someone whose crimes were so horrific that even mentioning his name makes people uncomfortable. And now there are allegations that the current administration might have been involved in covering up evidence related to this monster. So that's where we are right now. A whistleblower exposing potential evidence, tampering, Congress fighting over releasing documents, the White House blocking investigations, and the Republican Party tearing itself apart, trying to figure out how to handle all of this. And we're going to break down every single piece of this mess, show you what's really going on, and explain why this matters way more than most people realize. Because this isn't just about Trump and Epstein. This is about power, secrecy, accountability, and whether or not the American people can actually trust their government to tell them the truth. So buckle up, because this is going to be a ride. And trust me, you're going to want to hear every detail of what's really happening behind the scenes in Washington right now. Congress breaks silence as whistleblower exposes Trump Epstein cover-up. Okay, so let's dig into what's actually happening here, because I think a lot of people are missing the bigger picture. This isn't just another scandal that's going to blow over in a news cycle or two. This is something that cuts right to the heart of how our government operates, and honestly how much they think they can get away with. So first things first, let's talk about this whistleblower. Now the fact that this person is protected is huge. That means they went through the proper channels, they followed the rules, and they're covered under whistleblower protection laws. This isn't some rogue agent leaking stuff to the press. This is someone inside the FBI who saw something wrong and decided to tell Congress about it. And what they're alleging is absolutely wild. According to Senator Durbin's office, this whistleblower claims that FBI personnel were instructed to flag documents that mention Trump in the Epstein investigation files. Let that sink in for a minute. We're talking about an active criminal investigation into one of the most notorious criminals in recent history, and allegedly, people were being told to pay special attention to anything involving the president. Why would that be necessary? What possible legitimate reason could there be for singling out documents about one specific person, unless you're trying to either protect them or build a case against them? And here's the thing, the Justice Department isn't talking. They haven't issued a statement. They haven't denied the allegations. They haven't explained anything. Radio silence. Which, come on, if these allegations were completely false or taken out of context, wouldn't you expect them to come out swinging with the denial? Wouldn't you expect them to clarify what actually happened? But no, nothing, just silence. And in Washington, silence usually means something. It usually means someone is scrambling behind the scenes, trying to figure out how to spin this or contain it or make it go away. Now, while all this is going down, we've got the House Oversight Committee getting involved. And this is where things get really messy, because you can actually see the Republican Party starting to fracture in real time over this issue. The committee voted 8-2 to demand full release of the DOJ's Epstein records. 8-2. That means some Republicans broke ranks and voted with the Democrats on this. That's not supposed to happen, especially not on something this politically sensitive. But the White House objected. Of course they did. And Republican leadership, and this is just incredible, they actually ended the session early. They cut it short because the political fallout was getting too intense. Can you imagine being in that room? Like, you're a Republican lawmaker and you're watching this unfold? And you've got to decide, do I side with transparency and potentially anger the White House? Or do I stick with the party line and risk looking like I'm part of a cover-up? That's an impossible position to be in. And the divisions aren't just happening in Congress. Trump's own supporters are split on this. You've got some MAGA folks who are convinced this is all a witch hunt, just another attempt to take down Trump with manufactured scandals. But then you've got other Trump supporters who are actually calling for transparency, saying that if Trump has nothing to hide, then let's see everything. Release it all. Let the chips fall where they may. In that internal division within Trump's base, that's something we haven't seen much of. Usually they're pretty unified, pretty loyal, but this Epstein stuff is different. It hits different because even Trump's most loyal supporters have a hard time defending anything related to Jeffrey Epstein. Democrats, obviously, are having a field day with this. They're calling for full transparency, demanding answers, bringing up all the old allegations and connections between Trump and Epstein, and survivors of Epstein's abuse are speaking out, saying that the American people deserve to know the truth about everyone who was involved with Epstein, no matter how powerful they are. And honestly, how do you argue with that? How do you stand up and say that powerful people should be protected from scrutiny when we're talking about Jeffrey Epstein? You can't. It's political suicide. So you've got this perfect storm of political chaos, the whistleblower allegations, the congressional fight, the party divisions, the survivors demanding justice. It's all converging at exactly the wrong time for Trump and the Republicans. Now let's talk about Trump's response to all this because it's actually pretty fascinating. He's denying everything, obviously. He says he never wrote the letter that allegedly appears in Epstein's 2003 birthday album. And honestly, maybe he did it. Maybe that's completely false. But here's what's interesting. Trump also instructed his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to seek court approval to release grand jury testimony. On the surface, that looks like a transparency move. That looks like someone who has nothing to hide and wants to clear their name. But, and this is important, the key documents are still sealed. They're locked up behind court decisions. So Trump can say he wants transparency all day long. But the reality is that the most important evidence isn't being released. And that creates this situation where Trump gets to claim he's being transparent without actually having to deal with the consequences of real transparency. It's kind of genius, actually, from a political strategy standpoint. You get credit for asking for documents to be released, but you know that the courts are going to block it or delay it or tie it up in legal battles for months or years. So you look like the good guy who wants the truth to come out, but you never actually have to worry about what's in those documents becoming public, at least not anytime soon. And by the time they do come out, if they ever do, maybe the political landscape will have changed. Maybe people will have moved on to other scandals. Maybe it won't matter as much anymore. And speaking of timing, can we talk about how absolutely terrible the timing is for all of this? Trump's approval ratings are already at historic lows. Like, genuinely, some of the worst numbers we've seen for a sitting president in decades. The economy is shaky. There are ongoing investigations into multiple aspects of his administration. And now this Epstein scandal is back in the headlines. And we're less than a year away from the 2026 midterms. Republicans were already nervous about 2026 midterms. Republicans were already nervous about 2026. They were already worried about holding on to their seats with Trump's unpopularity dragging them down. And now they have to go back to their districts and explain why they're either supporting an investigation into the president's ties to Jeffrey Epstein or blocking an investigation into the president's ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Either way, it's a losing message. Either way, they're going to get hammered for it. This is why you're seeing some Republicans break ranks. They're looking at the political calculus and realizing that being seen as part of a cover-up might actually be worse than angering the White House. They're thinking about their own political survival, and they're making the calculation that transparency might be the safer bet. Better to be on record supporting an investigation than to be on record blocking one. Because in 2026, when they're running for re-election, they know the Democrats are going to use every vote, every statement, every action against them. But here's what most people aren't talking about. This scandal isn't just about Trump and Epstein. It's about a much bigger question of accountability and secrecy at the highest levels of government. The Epstein case has always been surrounded by conspiracy theories and allegations of cover-ups involving intelligence agencies, powerful politicians, and wealthy elites. And whether or not you believe those theories, the fact is that there are still a lot of unanswered questions about how Epstein operated for so long, who knew what he was doing, and who might have protected him. So when you have a whistleblower alleging that the FBI was given special instructions about documents mentioning the president, it feeds into all of those existing concerns about power and secrecy. It makes people wonder, what else are we not being told? What other evidence is being hidden or manipulated? Who else is involved in this? And once people start asking those questions, it's really hard to put that genie back in the bottle. And that's why this matters so much. This isn't just another political scandal that'll be forgotten in a week. This is touching on fundamental questions about whether our institutions can be trusted, whether powerful people are held to the same standards as everyone else, and whether the American people will ever get real answers about what happened with Jeffrey Epstein. These are big questions. These are the kinds of questions that shape how people view their government for generations. All right, so let's break this down into the key points you need to understand about what's really going on here, because there's a lot of noise and confusion around this story, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page about what actually matters. Point number one, the whistleblower allegations are serious and credible. This isn't some random person making wild claims on the internet. This is a protected FBI whistleblower who went through official channels to report potential misconduct. Senator Durbin's office confirmed it. The allegations are on the record. In the substance of what they're alleging, that FBI personnel were told to flag Epstein documents mentioning Trump. That's the kind of thing that, if true, represents a massive breach of how investigations are supposed to work. The FBI is supposed to be independent. They're supposed to follow the evidence wherever it leads, not single out documents about specific people for special treatment. So, either this whistleblower is lying, which seems unlikely given the protections and confirmations involved, or something very wrong happened inside the FBI during this investigation. And if something wrong happened, we need to know about it. We need to know why it happened, who ordered it, and what other evidence might have been compromised. Point number 2, Congress is genuinely divided on this, and that division is significant. When you have a House Oversight Committee voting 8-2 to release documents, with some Republicans breaking ranks to vote with Democrats, that tells you this isn't a simple partisan issue. There are Republicans who are uncomfortable enough with what they're hearing that they're willing to buck the White House and their own leadership. That's rare. That doesn't happen often. And the fact that Republican leadership ended the session early to avoid more fallout, that shows you how worried they are about where this is heading. They're trying to contain the damage, but the cracks are already showing. And once those cracks start appearing in party unity, they tend to get wider, not smaller. Because other Republicans are watching this and thinking about their own political futures. They're thinking about what it means to be associated with this scandal. They're thinking about how to explain their votes to constituents who want answers. Point number 3, the White House's response, or lack of response, is making everything worse. Look, if these allegations were completely baseless, you'd expect a full-throated denial from the Justice Department. You'd expect them to come out and explain exactly what happened, provide context, maybe even release some evidence to prove the whistleblower is wrong. But instead, we've got silence from Justice and objections from the White House about releasing documents. That creates a perception problem. Even if there's a perfectly innocent explanation for everything, the silence makes it look like they're hiding something. And in politics, perception is often more important than reality, because voters don't know what's really happening behind closed doors. All they see is the refusal to explain, the refusal to be transparent, the refusal to cooperate with investigations. And that looks guilty. It just does. Now let's talk about why this matters beyond just the immediate scandal. First, there's the political impact heading into 2026. Republicans are already facing tough midterm elections with Trump's low approval ratings. This Epstein scandal adds another layer of difficulty for them. Democratic candidates are going to hammer their Republican opponents on this. They're going to ask, why didn't you support transparency? What are you hiding? Do you care more about protecting the president than getting justice for Epstein's victims? Those are devastating attack ads waiting to happen. And Republican candidates are going to have to figure out how to respond without either alienating Trump's base or looking like they're part of a cover-up. That's a political nightmare. There's no good answer to those questions. You're damned if you do, and damned if you don't. Second, this reinforces every existing concern about power and accountability in Washington. People are already cynical about whether powerful people face real consequences for their actions. They already believe that there's one set of rules for the elite and another set of rules for everyone else. And when you have allegations of the FBI giving special treatment to documents about the president in an investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, one of the most reviled criminals in recent memory, it confirms every conspiracy theory and every cynical belief about how the system really works. That's corrosive to public trust in institutions, and that trust is already at historic lows. We can't afford to lose more of it, because once people stop trusting their government entirely, once they believe the whole system is rigged against them, that's when democracy starts to break down. Third, this story isn't going away. The whistleblower has protections. Congress is investigating. Survivors are demanding answers. The media is all over it. Even if the White House wants this to disappear, it's not going to. Every new development is going to generate more headlines. Every court decision about releasing documents is going to be news. Every time a Republican lawmaker breaks ranks on this issue, it's going to be a story. This is going to drag on for months, possibly into the 2026 campaign season. And the longer it drags on, the more damage it does politically, because it keeps the Trump-Epstein connection in the news. It keeps reminding voters about all the allegations and controversies. It keeps the scandal fresh in people's minds, right when Republicans need people to be thinking about literally anything else. So what comes next? Well, there are a few possibilities. The courts could eventually force the release of some or all of the sealed documents. That would be huge, obviously, because we finally get to see what's actually in those files. And depending on what's in there, it could either vindicate Trump completely, or, well, let's just say it could be really bad. Congress could continue investigating, holding hearings, calling witnesses, trying to get to the bottom of what the FBI was doing and why. They could subpoena documents. They could demand testimony from current and former officials. They could really dig deep into this. The Justice Department could finally break its silence and provide some explanation for what happened. They could say, look, here's what actually occurred. Here's why the whistleblower misunderstood the situation. Here's the full context. Or this could all get tied up in legal battles and political gridlock, and we might never get clear answers. That's probably the most frustrating possibility, but it's also a realistic one. But here's what I think is most likely. This is going to become a defining issue for the 2026 midterms. Democrats are going to make transparency and accountability their rallying cry. They're going to run on cleaning up corruption in Washington, on holding powerful people accountable, on getting justice for Epstein's victims. Republicans are going to be split between defending Trump and trying to distance themselves from the scandal. And voters are going to have to decide whether they believe the allegations, whether they care about what happened with Epstein, and whether they think their elected officials are being honest with them. And honestly, that's probably the most important question here. Do you trust the government to tell you the truth about this? Do you believe that powerful people are being held accountable? Or do you think this is just another example of the system protecting its own? Because at the end of the day, that's what this scandal is really about. It's not just about Trump. It's not just about Epstein. It's about whether we live in a country where everyone is subject to the same laws and the same scrutiny, or whether there are different rules for different people depending on how much power they have. And I think that's a question every American needs to be asking themselves right now. Not just about this scandal, but about everything we're seeing in Washington. Are we getting the truth? Are our institutions working the way they're supposed to? Or is there something fundamentally broken about how power operates at the highest levels of government? Because if the system is broken, if powerful people really are above the law, then that's something we need to acknowledge and figure out how to fix. Look, I don't have all the answers. Nobody does right now, because we don't have all the information. But what I do know is that this whistleblower came forward for a reason. Congress is fighting over this for a reason. The White House is blocking transparency for a reason. And all of those reasons matter. They matter for what they tell us about this specific case, and they matter for what they tell us about the state of American democracy in 2025. So yeah, Congress broke its silence. A whistleblower exposed potential misconduct. The Trump administration is facing serious allegations about the Epstein investigation, and we're all waiting to see what happens next, because whatever happens next is going to tell us a lot about who we are as a country and what we're willing to tolerate from the people in power. And that's the real story here, not just the scandal itself, but what it reveals about everything else. About power, about secrecy, about accountability, about whether our system works for everyone or just for the people at the top. These are the questions that matter. These are the questions that are going to define American politics for years to come. Stay tuned, because this is far from over. We'll be covering every twist and turn as this thing unfolds. And trust me, there are going to be more twists. There always are. The next few months are going to be wild, and you're going to want to be here for all of it.